Hi, welcome to Listen2Riches. Today we will share with you a book titled How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is a guidebook for your journey in social interactions. Before we dive into the book, let's start by listening to a few profound sentences together. To win friends, influence people, and transform yourself, think like a human being. Deal with others the way you would like them to deal with you. What the other person cares about most is themselves. These ideas are timeless. While humans may not perish from excessive physical labor, they can indeed wither away from extravagance and anxiety. These words might sound familiar to you, especially the last sentence, which might have been used to inspire you at some point by your boss. Although these words are quite familiar, do you know who originally spoke them? The sage behind these words is Dale Carnegie. This name might ring a bell for you. He laid the foundation for modern Western interpersonal education and is hailed as an outstanding spiritual mentor and master of success in the 20th century. So, why did Carnegie earn such a prestigious title? Let's trace back his life story, which reads like a practical manual for an ordinary person's journey from adversity to success. Carnegie grew up in poverty, suffered from malnutrition, was frail in stature, and often wore clothes with patches, making him the target of ridicule and mockery. During his youth, he longed to display heroism on the baseball field and be admired by others. However, his athletic abilities were lacking, so he could only watch others compete from a distance, never getting the chance to showcase his skills. Later on, he realized that those skilled in public speaking and debate could also capture people's attention, so he decided to embark on that path. Typically, the story might have taken a perfect turn at this point. Unfortunately, Carnegie was not exceptionally talented in the field of public speaking. He participated in 12 speaking competitions, facing defeat each time and even coming close to giving up. However, on his 13th attempt, he finally won a university trophy. This marked his first taste of success and had a profound impact on the rest of his life. From then on, he went from being an obscure boy clapping in the streets to a shining figure known throughout his school, city, and even the world. Carnegie became a passionate enthusiast of public speaking, inspiring countless lost souls and motivating them to achieve greatness through his speeches. According to statistics, Carnegie delivered over 150,000 speeches. This number means that for 410 years since Christopher Columbus discovered America, he had to listen to one speech every day. Even if each speech lasted only 3 minutes, those 150,000 speeches would have to continue nonstop for 24 hours, lasting for a total of 10 months. Later on, he turned his years of experience into written words, creating various works to help more people improve themselves. Among them, the most famous is the one we are going to delve into today, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Some may think that since this is a book written by a master of success, it must be filled with empty platitudes. However, this is not the case. First and foremost, we must clarify that although Carnegie is hailed as a master of success, his impact has endured over time. What's more, he is a maestro of interpersonal relations. He doesn't guide you on how to get rich or famous. His works are neither self-help platitudes nor mechanical motivational speeches. Instead, they provide you with a step-by-step, in-depth wisdom on how to build better interpersonal relationships. This book is not about shouting slogans or waving flags. It focuses on practical guidance for your real-life actions. However, there are many books like this on the market, so why choose How to Win Friends and Influence People? Because this book was the precursor to all subsequent works on interpersonal relationships. In around 1925, the University of Chicago and the YMCA School of Commerce in the United States conducted a joint survey to determine the knowledge areas that adults were most eager to learn. The survey revealed that health issues were at the top of the list, followed by improving interpersonal skills. Given these results, the project leaders decided to hire Carnegie to establish an adult education course on interpersonal relations in Connecticut. So, why choose Carnegie? Well, since 1912, he had been providing various training courses for New York's business elite, amassing significant experience and reputation. When he attempted to find a practical and effective guide on interpersonal relations as a course material, he couldn't find a suitable one. Therefore, he decided to write the course material himself, filling a gap in adult education that had never been attempted before. This book is certainly worth our careful consideration. Carnegie utilizes the common weaknesses and flaws in human nature to help us address interpersonal issues with precision. But just how important is interpersonal skill, you might wonder? Back in the 1930s, the Carnegie Education Foundation revealed a pattern. Even in industries that demand high levels of technical expertise, a person's success is attributed only to 15% of their professional capabilities, while the remaining 85% relies on personality traits and leadership abilities. This phenomenon is not hard to grasp. Whether your profession is in business or not, everyone needs to deal with interpersonal issues in their daily lives. Even as parents, you must handle your relationships with your children appropriately. Naturally, you can't simply resort to criticism and blame when your children make mistakes. Of course, while interpersonal skills are crucial, most people don't aspire to become orators. What we need are practical techniques that can be applied in both work and life, preferably ones that work quickly, like a fast-acting remedy. The core question addressed in Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People is how to rapidly and effectively enhance your interpersonal skills, becoming a charismatic and popular individual. Carnegie presents 3 principles that can make anyone likable, and we will explore them in depth. Alright, let's take a look at the first method Carnegie proposes: genuinely caring about others. A philosopher once said that one of humanity's deepest desires is to be noticed by others. This viewpoint holds great wisdom. You've surely encountered numerous people who go to great lengths to show off themselves in order to gain attention, which might explain the increasingly common sight of people wearing fur coats in the sweltering heat or scantily clad in the dead of winter. We all know that this behavior is often deemed peculiar and, aside from earning a silent acknowledgement of "you're one of a kind," it rarely garners more than that. But why does this phenomenon occur? Because, whether in the past, present, or future, people will always place themselves at the forefront of their minds. So, even if someone has horns growing out of their head, others will give them a quick glance and then ponder, "Why don't I have horns?" Here's a simple example. When you take a group photo with others, whose face do you check first? When you beautify a photo before posting it on social media, do you consider how others in the photo might feel? The New York Telephone Company conducted a study to examine the most frequently used words in everyday communication. As expected, the most frequently used word was "I." In a sample of 500 phone conversations, this word was used 3,900 times, with everyone constantly repeating, I. These are inherent traits of human nature, and no matter how hard you try, you can't build friendships by focusing on yourself, because true friendship cannot be built on such a foundation. Carnegie especially admires the renowned Austrian psychologist Alfred Adler. Adler once said, "A person who does not care about others will suffer significant setbacks in life and harm to others." Therefore, Carnegie tells us that if you want to be likable, the first task is to learn how to care about others. So, what does genuine care mean? Let's listen to a story from Carnegie. He made a habit of quietly recording his friends' birthdays. How do you go about it? Although Carnegie wasn't particularly fond of astrology, he would often ask people if they believed in astrology during conversations and then steer the conversation toward their birthday. When the person told him their birthday, Carnegie would silently remember it, and when their birthday came around, he would offer a heartfelt greeting. Everyone feels tremendously happy when they receive such greetings, and as a result, Carnegie made many friends. See, it's these simple yet heartfelt actions that made Carnegie more likable. If you can, like Carnegie, pay more attention to others, make them feel valued in an unobtrusive way, you will undoubtedly gain more friendships. Of course, caring about others not only helps build friendships but also aids companies in winning over clients. For example, Charlie, a graduate of Carnegie's training program, worked at a well-known bank in New York. Once he needed to write a market research report about a certain company. During an interview with the company's chairman, the chairman's secretary suddenly interrupted, informing the chairman that they had run out of stamps for their son's stamp collection. Charlie was momentarily confused, wondering what that had to do with him. The chairman explained that his 12-year-old son had taken a keen interest in stamp collecting recently. Charlie, a bit puzzled, exchanged a few pleasantries and then began asking the questions he was concerned about. However, the chairman kept avoiding giving direct answers and only talked about trivial matters. It was clear that he wasn't very interested in the conversation, and Charlie left empty-handed. Afterwards, he shared this incident with Carnegie, who reminded him that to get the chairman to reveal the desired information, one must first understand what matters most to them, and the key is to pay attention to the other person. Charlie was puzzled and asked, "How can I possibly know what the chairman wants to hear on our first meeting? I'm not some mysterious mind reader." Suddenly, he remembered the mention of stamps by the female secretary. He thought about the chairman mentioning his son's interest in stamp collecting and connected it with the fact that his bank's foreign affairs department received mail from all over the world every day. He had found his entry point. But oh, the chairman had his mind on his son's stamp collecting hobby at that moment. How could he care about the interview? The next afternoon, Charlie visited the chairman again. This time, he had the secretary inform the chairman that he had a large collection of stamps and intended to give them to the chairman's son. As a result, he received a warm welcome, and the chairman even happily showed him pictures of his son. The two chatted happily for over an hour, and whether it was the questions Charlie wanted to know or some unexpected information, the chairman readily provided answers. In this way, by focusing on the other person's interests, Charlie not only successfully completed his task and won a new client for the company but also made a new friend. There are various ways to show concern for others, and not every situation requires you to talk about yourself incessantly. Sometimes listening is the best way to show your concern. At a dinner hosted by a New York publisher, Carnegie met a botanist. Even though he had never encountered this field before and had no knowledge about it, Carnegie spent the entire evening attentively listening to the botanist's stories about various plants and indoor gardens. After the dinner, the botanist praised Carnegie highly, believing that he was inspirational and the most interesting and conversational person he had ever met. The most conversational? Was this a joke? Carnegie hardly spoke throughout the evening because he knew nothing about botany and couldn't engage in deep conversation. All Carnegie did was listen, and yet it earned him high praise. This shows that listening is the most subtle way to please others, and few can resist such genuine care. Here's another example. During holidays and family gatherings, many people complain about being bombarded with a series of questions when they return home, and they even feel annoyed. Over time, they may not even want to put on a fake smile to deal with it, and they end up being labeled as ungrateful within the family circle. Do you want to be the person who is popular and eloquent? Carnegie advises us not to wait for others to initiate the conversation. You can proactively show concern for others, ask various questions, and then simply listen patiently. However, Carnegie also reminds us that genuine care must be the basis. Authentic interaction is the most basic rule. Only with sincerity can you achieve the desired effect. Otherwise, you will come across as insincere in your sincerity or genuinely insincere. Alright, after our discussion, let's summarize the key points. One of humanity's inherent desires is to gain the attention of others. Therefore, Carnegie's first method for improving interpersonal skills is to genuinely care about others. Next, we will delve into the second method, which is to praise others before attempting to change them. A common trait in human nature is that no one likes to be ordered around. If you truly want to influence others, you should place the other person above all and use praise as a motivating tool. A student named George shared his experience at a Carnegie training class. George was a safety manager at an engineering company, and his responsibility was to ensure that everyone entering the construction site wore a safety helmet. Although wearing a safety helmet was common sense, there were always some people who didn't comply. Whenever George saw people not wearing safety helmets, he would issue orders as a manager demanding that they must put on their safety helmets. How did the employees respond? They usually complied at the moment, but as soon as George left, they would immediately take off their safety helmets. Why did this happen? Wasn't George just looking out for everyone's safety? That's true, but you have to understand that no one likes to be commanded. So, even if you have good intentions, if you order me to do something, I will resist. One time, I saw a conspicuous red sign in a remote corner of the street that read, "No urinating or defecating here." What's more ironic is that nearby, several children were competing to see who could urinate the highest, as if they didn't care at all about the prohibition on the sign. George had to find a solution. Carnegie advised him to change his approach. The next time he saw an employee not wearing a safety helmet, he could ask them in a considerate tone if the safety helmet didn't fit well, if it was uncomfortable to wear, or if it needed replacement, and then, in a friendly manner, tell them that safety helmets are for their own safety, encouraging them to put on their safety helmets. George, with some skepticism, tried adopting these suggestions. Miraculously, those who had previously refused to wear safety helmets gradually began to accept George's words. This was because George no longer issued orders with the authority of a superior, but instead prioritized the well-being of others and provided suggestions. Therefore, people found it easier to accept. In the workplace, if a once excellent employee's performance declines, how would you deal with it? Reprimand them or even fire them? However, these methods are not wise. You should use encouragement to change their state instead of resorting to harsh blame. Let's hear a specific example to better understand this principle. Henry was the manager of a service department in a truck dealership in Indiana. Recently, one of his mechanics' job performance had been declining. In the past, Henry might have directly criticized him or even fired him. After attending Carnegie's training, Henry learned a valuable approach, which is to motivate others through praise. So, he called the mechanic into his office. He first praised his strengths, then pointed out the recent issues, and finally expressed his expectation to see him return to his previous diligent and dedicated state. The mechanic didn't want to disappoint Henry's approval, so he would work hard to maintain this good reputation. This story is actually a classic strategy. In the workplace, if you're a leader looking to change the company culture, you can try similar methods. Does this method only apply in the workplace? In fact, it is equally effective in everyday life. Carnegie had a friend whose wife lived in New York, and they had a beautiful lawn in front of their house. Her husband meticulously maintained the lawn to keep it lush. However, there were always some mischievous kids playing around who would trample his beloved lawn. His wife had scolded them in anger and also tried gentle persuasion, but nothing worked. Later, Carnegie gave them a suggestion: identify the naughtiest kid among them and assign them an important task: become the private detective of the lawn, safeguarding its peace. This little detective now plays a significant role, patrolling near the lawn and promptly stopping any child attempting to damage it, solving his wife's predicament. Well, this is Carnegie's second rule: nobody likes to be commanded. If you genuinely want to change others, always consider their feelings and use praise as motivation. It might sound like a skillful technique, doesn't it? Absolutely, this principle is something most people are aware of, but Carnegie reminds us that believing these methods will inevitably succeed in changing others is overly naive. In reality, when we start to practice, we often become impatient and forget about praise, resorting to criticism, blame, and complaints. Criticism and complaints only damage our relationships greatly because, in most cases, no matter how big the mistake or how serious the error, people rarely take self-blame, let alone readily accept criticism. This is another weakness of human nature. Therefore, Carnegie provides us with the third rule to improve interpersonal skills: if you must criticize someone, do so cautiously. In fact, Carnegie suggests it's best to avoid criticizing others because the harm of criticism is enormous. How impactful is it? The renowned British novelist Thomas Hardy, known for works like Tess of the D'Urberville, nearly gave up writing due to sharp criticism. Furthermore, criticism is like a boomerang. It always comes back to hurt us because those criticized tend to defend themselves, often responding with equally harsh criticism. Once, when Lincoln was still a lawyer, he anonymously wrote a letter in the newspaper mocking a local politician, making that politician the town's laughingstock. The politician was named Jean Coup, and when he found out that Lincoln had written the letter, he was furious and intended to duel with him. If it weren't for teammates who arrived in time to stop them, Lincoln might not have survived, facing the danger of being harmed by the opponent's spear. After this incident, Lincoln understood a key principle of dealing with people, and he never criticized anyone for anything ever again. Life is full of drama. Despite resolving not to criticize others, Lincoln was constantly subjected to criticism from his wife after marriage. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of Lincoln's life was his marriage, more heart-wrenching than his assassination. In his 23-year marriage, Lincoln's wife was always nitpicking his flaws and dissatisfied with everything he did. She accused Lincoln of not having a straight back, of walking with a poor posture. She even said Lincoln's ears were unsightly, his nose not straight enough, his head too small, his feet too big, making him look like a sickly ghost. His wife's criticisms and complaints tormented Lincoln to the extent that he intentionally stayed away from home for months, year after year, residing in rural inns. There are many similar stories. Tolstoy once said that unhappy families each have their unique unhappiness, and conflicts arising from criticism and nagging account for the majority. If you want a happy and fulfilling marriage, remember not to criticize frequently. But how can ordinary people discipline themselves not to criticize others? To mitigate the negative impact of criticism, most people adhere to one principle: praise first, then criticize. When I was studying, my mother always urged me to get rid of my careless habits. After every exam, she would say, "Child, your test results are really good and I'm happy for you. But if you could spend more time on algebra, it would be even better." My mother thought this approach made her appear benevolent. Initially, I did benefit from it, but later, when my mother said, "I'm happy for you," I would feel discouraged. Because this statement was only a prelude to criticism, it made the earlier praise less credible, making it challenging to influence changes in my study habits. Carnegie tells us that sometimes all it takes is to change one word to solve a problem. So, what word should you use? It's simple, and let's experience it again. Child, we are proud of your achievements this semester, and if you can maintain this learning attitude, your algebra grades will also improve. With this kind of expression, we can genuinely feel the praise from our parents, and it's easier to achieve the parents' goal of nurturing their child. As for the highest form of criticism, it is not to criticize at all, or in other words, to be tolerant. Hoover was a renowned aerobatic pilot. Once, when he was at an altitude of 300 feet, both engines of his plane failed. Fortunately, Hoover reacted quickly, parachuting in time, which prevented casualties. However, his expensive plane was completely wrecked in the crash. After landing, Hoover immediately checked the plane's fuel tank and discovered that it was filled with jet fuel instead of the intended type. Obviously, the mechanic responsible for maintaining the plane had made a mistake. You can imagine Hoover's emotions at that moment. This serious mistake nearly cost 3 lives. But Hoover did not criticize him. He simply extended his arm, embraced the mechanic's shoulder, and said, "To prove that you won't make the same mistake again, I invite you to help me repair my F-51 plane tomorrow." Faced with this form of criticism, I believe the mechanic would be deeply grateful and would never make the same mistake again. Well, this is the third method Carnegie imparts to us for improving our interpersonal skills. Try to avoid criticizing others, and if unavoidable, do so cautiously. Finally, let's summarize the essence of this book. For adults, one of the greatest challenges in daily life may be dealing with interpersonal issues. The core focus of this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is on how to quickly and effectively enhance your interpersonal skills, becoming someone who is widely appreciated. Carnegie combines human traits and presents 3 key methods. First, the deep-seated human desire is to win the appreciation of others, so if you want to make more friends and be well-liked, start by genuinely caring about others from the heart. Secondly, nobody likes to be forcefully directed, so if you genuinely wish to change others, wholeheartedly empathize with them and use praise as a motivating tool. Thirdly, no matter how big the mistake, in most cases, people won't self-blame and they won't readily accept criticism. Therefore, if you must criticize someone, do so cautiously. Objectively, while the advice in this book is correct, putting it into practice can still be quite challenging. For instance, when you're in a bad mood, anger and criticism are more likely to come out than praise for others. People often effortlessly talk about what they care about while ignoring others. In reality, this book isn't about imparting knowledge but about assisting us in cultivating new habits and exploring new behaviors. This requires long-term accumulation, consistent effort, and active practice in daily life. Literary giant George Bernard Shaw once said, "Human beings are incapable of being educated." Therefore, we can view this book as a guide in our lives. When you need to influence others, don't succumb to instinctive reactions because those actions are usually wrong. At this moment, try to think about the methods Carnegie provides, make an effort to put them into practice, and see what kind of results you can achieve. Ultimately, may you become a master of communication as soon as possible, being well-liked both at home and in the workplace. Congratulations on completing another book. Thank you all for your support and attention. Please subscribe to Listen2Riches, like, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Let's combine wisdom and practice to achieve our financial goals and create a better future. Thank you, everyone. See you in the next episode.